Is the UK considering at any level the idea of some sort of deal between Moscow and Kyiv?
No.
David Cameron went to Florida to talk to Donald Trump. The reports that came out of that was that he talked about a deal with Donald Trump. Is that not true?
Look, it's as simple as this. Ukraine's been illegally invaded by Putin. If you give a bully like Putin an inch, they'll take a mile. And in this case, he would take quite a lot of not just Ukraine, but I'm not sure he would stop there either. We've been in this position before in Europe, and we simply will not allow that to happen again.
We're not actually very keen to fight wars at all anymore. We're out of Afghanistan. We let bully boys around the world more or less do what they like. The international community does. We will back Ukraine, but we won't put planes in the air to support them. I wonder if we're not actually in a pre-war world. We're in an anti-war world still.
Well, I don't agree with that. It's an interesting point, but I don't agree with it. Not least because actually, if you look at these global conflicts, whether it's supporting our Ukrainian friends or indeed in the Middle East, where we have been in active conflict directly in terms of, for example, bombing the Houthis or with the defense of Israel from those missiles and drones the other week, we are one of the very few militaries in the world who's actually prepared to do what we say we're going to do, which is defend freedom. And so, no, I don't detect that at all. Having said that, but by the way, as Defence Secretary, I'm very keen that we prepare. Of course, I'd far rather we don't end up having to fight active wars. And one of the reasons why I made that speech back in January at Lancaster House that you've just quoted from was to make sure that we're able to deter those who want to harm us, our adversaries.
And that's a good point, the question of deterrence. How are we able to do that? You've committed to 2.5% of defence spending. You're talking today about building lots of new ships and submarines. We still have the smallest army in 200 years, Grant Shapps. The question, I suppose, for you, even with all that shipbuilding, even with an increased defence spending, are we as geared up as we need to be in this dangerous world?
Well, this 2.5%, which is 2.5% of GDP that we set out last month to spend, means that we're able to do a huge amount more. But to be clear, I mean, you're mentioning about the size of the army, which is one aspect. Of course, there's also the Navy, the Air Force, the cyber, the space. So we still have, upwards of a couple 100,000 people sort of in active military service. And the important thing is, outside of the United States, we're the biggest spender in NATO. We're by far the biggest military spender in Europe. So I wouldn't want your listeners to underestimate where the United Kingdom sits in all of this. But we couldn't be. I mean, today I'm actually saying that the Navy is building up to 28 new ships and submarines, and including these up to 6 ships that I've announced today for our Royal Marines, which will be very versatile ships and secure the future of that commando force. We couldn't do that unless the Prime Minister and I are committed to spending 2.5% of our gross domestic product on defence. And as I say, I think it's money well invested, because the best way to defend ourselves against attack is to show that you're ready. Of course, that's before you get into all the jobs created in the UK in our defence industries and the exports and the high tech that comes from all of that.
Let's talk about Ukraine, because we're just hearing from Ukraine just when you came on air. Is the UK considering at any level the idea of some sort of deal between Moscow and Kyiv?
No.
David Cameron went to Florida to talk to Donald Trump. The reports that came out of that was that he talked about a deal with Donald Trump. Is that not true?
Look, it's as simple as this. Ukraine's been illegally invaded by Putin. If you give a bully like Putin an inch, they'll take a mile. And in this case, he would take quite a lot of not just Ukraine, but I'm not sure he would stop there either. We've been in this position before in Europe, and we simply will not allow that to happen again. Now, in the end, what Ukraine does and how it decides to bring this to an end is their business. What I can confirm is the United Kingdom will back Ukraine all the way. I spoke to my opposite number, the Ukrainian Defence Minister, just yesterday afternoon, Minister Umerov, and I made the same point to him. Britain will stand behind Ukraine for as long as it takes, because we understand this isn't just about Ukrainian security, it's about European and British security, about global security too.
Did David Cameron say to Donald Trump, did he mention a deal to Donald Trump?
No, obviously I wasn't in the room. I know what the Foreign Secretary did say, which is it's very, very important that the United States follows the UK's lead. Remember, we just increased our money to Ukraine this year to £3 billion, our biggest ever package. We'd just done that at the time. And he certainly would have said to Trump, it's very important that the United States, for the United States' own sake, sees that package go through Congress. And I'm pleased to say that package did go through Congress, and thank goodness, because it's armaments and defence equipment very much needed by our Ukrainian friends. So I know that was part of the conversation. But there is just no sense at all in which Britain would try to persuade, strong-arm, or otherwise Ukraine into accepting giving up some of their territory. Yeah. That's a decision entirely for Ukraine, entirely. And as I say, I don't think it's plausible at all for Putin to win this war, and it's important he doesn't.
A couple of other issues while you're here, Grant Shapps, if I may. MPs voted last night 170 to 169, that's a majority of one, to bar MPs who've been arrested for sexual or violent offences. I'm interested in your thoughts of this. Is it right, do you think, that someone could be arrested, not charged, and taken out of Parliament while a process lasts a long time?
I personally voted for the lesser version of that, which is to wait for a charge, because, of course, somebody could be arrested. The police might just be carrying out their inquiries based on an allegation, and then it turns out not to be true. We've seen that happen, including in at least one case to an MP. So I voted the other way. I mean, obviously, there were arguments in both directions. There's a free vote, so that means that the government or parties didn't take a line on it, and MPs came to their own decision.
Are you worried that the bar has gone to arrest, not charge, because you voted the other way, but are you concerned with where you've ended up, or can you live with that?
I mean, look, in the end, Parliament has made the decision, and I respect the votes in Parliament. Of course, it could look at it again if it needed to. I mean, but for me, it does seem to be just on the wrong side of natural justice, and that's why I voted to say you should wait for a charge. But there are passionate arguments in both directions, and I can see you can make that argument in both directions. I thought it's slightly the wrong side of the line. Parliament's decided. That's why we get to vote on these things.
Just finally, Esther McVey has given us something to talk about this morning. It came out yesterday, actually, the Minister for Common Sense. She's banning LGBT lanyards in the civil service. And there's lots of people have an opinion on this, Grant Shapps. I'm just interested, you effectively run a department. Would you tell someone in the MOD to take off a rainbow lanyard?
Actually, look, I'm more interested in the jobs that the civil service do. In the case of the MOD, there are many fine civil servants. And I'm also interested in making sure that we have an efficient civil service, which I have to say has become a lot larger after COVID and hasn't shrunk back down. So one of the ways that, for example, we're going to pay for some of these new ships, and in fact that increased defence budget, is to remove about 72,000 civil servants from the system to take the civil service back to the level.
Do you think they should wear? Do you think they should be allowed to wear rainbow lanyards? Do you have a view on that?
I see. Well, look, I mean, personally, I don't mind people expressing their views on these things. That it doesn't, what lanyard somebody wears doesn't particularly concern me. But I do think, and this is where I think Esther McVey has a point, that what we want is our civil servants to be getting on with the main job. And the main job is to serve the department they work for, in my case, defence, but across Whitehall. Yeah. That is the main concern. And I think she was sort of getting at the idea that should be the focus for civil servants.
Grant Shapps, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Grant Shapps there, the Defence Secretary. No deal is ever going to be suggested by the UK to Ukraine, and he's not that bothered about lanyards. People can wear them if they like.